Lee Van Cleef's life reads like a classic American story shaped by hardship, resilience, and quiet determination. Born Clarence Leroy Van Cleef, Jr. on January 9, 1925 in Somerville, New Jersey, he came of age during the Great Depression, an era that demanded self-reliance and emotional toughness. These early conditions instilled in him a sense of discipline and independence that would remain central to his identity. Van Cleef was never flashy or indulgent. Instead, he carried himself with a stoic intensity that reflected a man shaped by struggle rather than privilege. His youth taught him that progress came slowly and only through perseverance. These lessons followed him into adulthood, influencing how he approached both life and art. Long before he became a cinematic icon, Van Cleef was already forming the inner architecture of a man who would endure setbacks, redefine success on his own terms, and leave a lasting mark on film history. Early life and the foundations of character. Growing up in New Jersey during the economic devastation of the 1930s, Lee Van Cleef learned early that survival required grit and adaptability. His family, like millions of others, faced uncertainty and limited opportunity, conditions that fostered self-discipline and emotional restraint. Van Cleef developed a quiet seriousness, preferring observation over exhibition, a trait that later became one of his greatest strengths as an actor. These formative years taught him the value of hard work and personal accountability. There was little room for fantasy. Progress depended on effort and resolve. This grounded upbringing shaped his worldview and his approach to relationships and career choices. Even as a young man, Van Cleef displayed a sense of independence and inner resolve that set him apart. These qualities, forged in childhood adversity, would later translate seamlessly into the morally complex characters he portrayed on screen: military service and the shaping of discipline. World War II marked a defining chapter in Van Cleef's life when he enlisted in the United States Navy. Military service reinforced the values he had already learned during his youth: discipline, structure, and emotional control under pressure. Serving his country during a global conflict demanded courage and adaptability, qualities that strengthened his character and broadened his perspective. The Navy taught him how to function within a rigid hierarchy while maintaining personal integrity, a balance that would later mirror his experience in the film industry. Van Cleef emerged from the war more focused and self-assured, carrying with him a deep respect for duty and perseverance. This period also instilled in him a calmness in the face of adversity, an ability to remain composed when circumstances turned difficult. That composure would later become one of his most recognizable traits as a performer. Hollywood beginnings and the power of subtlety. After the war, Lee Van Cleef turned his attention to acting, approaching the craft with the seriousness of a vocation rather than a dream of fame. His film debut came in 1952 with High Noon, where his screen time was brief but memorable. Hollywood quickly recognized his striking appearance, sharp features, piercing eyes, and an intensity that demanded attention even in silence. Early roles often cast him as outlaws and henchmen, characters defined more by presence than dialogue. Rather than resist this typecasting, Van Cleef refined it. He learned to communicate through stillness, posture, and timing, developing a minimalist style that conveyed menace and intelligence without excess. Though stardom remained elusive, these early years were crucial. They allowed him to build a distinctive screen persona rooted in restraint, patience, and psychological depth. The car accident and a career in limbo. In 1958, just as his career seemed poised for growth, Van Cleef's momentum was abruptly halted by a serious car accident. The incident left him physically injured and professionally sidelined, forcing him into an uncertain period marked by reduced opportunities and personal doubt. Hollywood, notoriously unforgiving, began to overlook him, and steady work became increasingly rare. For many actors, such a setback would have ended a career entirely. For Van Cleef, it became a period of reflection and recalibration. Rather than surrender to frustration, he reassessed his path and prepared himself for new possibilities. This difficult chapter tested his resilience, but also strengthened his resolve. The accident, while devastating, ultimately became a turning point, pushing him toward opportunities beyond the traditional Hollywood system. and setting the stage for a remarkable reinvention. Rebirth in Europe and the Italian Western. As opportunities in Hollywood diminished, Lee Van Cleef found unexpected salvation in European cinema, particularly in Italy. During the early 1960s, Italian filmmakers were reshaping the Western genre, emphasizing moral ambiguity, stylized violence, and psychological depth. This new cinematic language suited Van Cleef perfectly. European directors valued his intensity, maturity, and understated power, qualities that had been underutilized in Hollywood. The move abroad revitalized his career and gave him creative freedom he had never known. No longer confined to minor roles, he was allowed to explore complex characters driven by personal codes, rather than simple notions of good and evil. Italy became the place where Van Cleef was not merely employed, but truly appreciated. This cultural and artistic shift marked the beginning of his transformation from character actor to international star. For a few dollars more and international stardom. The defining moment of Van Cleef's career arrived in 1965 with Sergio Leone's For a Few Dollars More. Cast as Colonel Douglas Mortimer, he delivered a performance of remarkable control and emotional depth. Mortimer was neither hero nor villain, but a man shaped by loss, guided by a strict moral code, and driven by quiet vengeance. Van Cleef infused the role with dignity and restraint, commanding the screen through subtle gestures and measured intensity. This performance reintroduced him to the world as a leading man and earned him widespread acclaim. Audiences and critics alike recognized the sophistication he brought to the role. The film not only solidified his status within the spaghetti western genre, but also redefined how villains and anti-heroes could be portrayed. Van Cleef had finally found roles worthy of his abilities, personal life, and the search for stability. Behind the camera, Van Cleef's personal life reflected both struggle and perseverance. He married Patty Ruth Kay in 1943, and together they had 3 children. However, the pressures of an unstable acting career and constant uncertainty took their toll, leading to divorce in 1958. His second marriage, to Joan Marchgary Daha in 1960, coincided with a transitional period in his life, but it too ended in divorce in 1974. Stability finally came in 1976 when he married Barbara Havalone. Their relationship provided emotional grounding during the later years of his career. Barbara remained a constant source of support, particularly as Van Cleef's health began to decline. Through personal setbacks and renewed companionship, his private life mirrored the resilience and endurance that defined his professional journey. Health challenges and unbroken dedication. Despite his professional success, Van Cleef's health deteriorated significantly in the 1970s. Diagnosed with serious heart disease and later fitted with a pacemaker, he faced physical limitations that might have ended his career. Instead, he continued working with remarkable determination. Even as his body weakened, his performances retained their intensity and gravitas. Films like Escape from New York showcased his ability to embody morally complex figures with authority and nuance. Van Cleef refused to be defined by illness, approaching each role with the same discipline that had guided him throughout his life. His persistence during these years exemplified his commitment to his craft and his refusal to surrender to circumstance. The strength he displayed off-screen was as compelling as the characters he portrayed on it. Outro, the enduring legacy of the best of the bad. Lee Van Cleef passed away on December 16, 1989, leaving behind a career that redefined cinematic villainy and anti-heroism. Laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park, his gravestone bears the inscription, "Best of the Bad," a phrase that perfectly captures his legacy. Van Cleef elevated supporting roles into unforgettable performances, proving that menace could be quiet and power could reside in restraint. His influence continues to resonate in modern cinema, particularly within genres that value moral complexity and subtlety. More than a character actor, he was a master of presence, capable of conveying entire emotional landscapes with a single glance. His life, marked by adversity, reinvention, and unwavering dedication, stands as a testament to endurance. Lee Van Cleef remains not just a legend of film, but a symbol of artistic perseverance.